Chapter 403 Army of Spirits. Elder Mu had used the powers of the Golden Tree once before to support him and Elder Sun in restraining Detian. At this time, the Golden Tree's powers were used once more to protect the entire city and to help Shrek City's warriors recover. The amount of energy that this endeavor consumed from the Golden Tree was astounding. The battle wasn't over, and the Soul Beast army remained just outside the city. They were still charging against the wall as if they felt no exhaustion, and the Golden Tree's energies were being continuously spent. This also meant that Elder Mu and Elder Sun were drawing less energy from the Golden Tree on their side, and this also meant they would seal Detian for a shorter period of time. It was a desperate method to solve their problems at hand without any consideration for the consequences, a solution that they could only turn to when they had no other choice. Elder Song hovered in midair and felt her soul power regenerating as she gazed into the sky and muttered, "If the Golden Tree is used like that one more time, we may no longer be able to maintain that seal in the sky." Unleashing the Golden Tree's energies directly affected the seal in the sky. The light ripples in the sky were now visibly stronger than before, as if Detian's struggles had become much more intense. This protection would only allow Shrek's warriors to last for another 2 to 4 more hours. But what about afterwards? Shrek Academy's senior individuals were contemplating this problem, and were almost hopeless. Suddenly, the Valkyrie Douluo, Shenlina pointed to a certain direction and asked, "Mum, look, what's that?" She was pointing towards the northwest. She was high in the sky, so she could see clearly, and even though the night was dark, the dark green light that shone faintly from that direction were unnaturally obvious and glaring. Those dark green hues were tinged with dark red and white, and seemed very drifty and fleeting as they moved towards Shrek City. These dots were still quite sparse and dispersed in the beginning, but they swiftly grew in number within her field of vision. They became dense and compact as they tromped towards Shrek City, and even though they weren't moving very quickly, they were definitely moving towards Shrek City. What are those things? Are they her reinforcements? Elder Song focused her attention towards those lights. The night was dark, and those lights were still quite a distance away, so she couldn't see very clearly. Shenlina forced a laugh and replied, "My only wish is that those things aren't reinforcements for the Soul Beast army." The army of Soul Beasts didn't seem to sense the arrival of those unwelcome guests, because the golden light that suddenly emerged from Shrek City caused quite a disturbance among them. The Bear Lord, the Myriad Demon King, the Scarlet King, and the other powerful Soul Beasts were attacking that golden light with every ounce of their strength. There were quite a few of them now, and it didn't take long before many different colors dotted the horizon densely in the distance. Shenlina swiftly descended back into the city. She retrieved a telescopic soul tool and then gazed towards the northwest again, and her face quickly became ghastly pale. "What are those things? Tell me. What can be worse than total annihilation of Shrek City?" Elder Song laughed bitterly as she spoke. Shenlina was momentarily stunned. "I can see skeletons, Jiangshi, headless horsemen, and many different strange and peculiar creatures. They seem like the Holy Ghost Church." Elder Song was also taken aback. If the Holy Ghost Church interfered at a time like this, they were definitely not here to aid Shrek City. Shrek City was currently besieged by a great army of Soul Beasts, and the Holy Ghost Church would have only one goal if they were here. They wanted to reap unfair gains from this battle. There were a spectacular number of Soul Beasts who had perished on the battlefield, and quite a number of Shrek City's soldiers were also dead. Those spirits and corpses had always been what the Holy Ghost Church liked best. That's not right. If they were here to reap unfair benefits, they wouldn't have appeared so quickly. They would have waited until both sides suffered heavy losses before making a move so that they could maximize their profits and gains. Furthermore, they would have to defeat this powerful beast tide. The Holy Ghost Church can't be that stupid. Can it be that they're unafraid of the beast tide attacking them? Shenlina was full of doubts and confusion. Elder Song's expression was solemn as she said, "Unless the Holy Ghost Church has something to do with this beast tide from the Great Stardow Forest. Perhaps this has been their arrangement from the start." Shenlina snapped around at her mother and said, "Mum, your speculation is too frightening. However, the Great Stardow Forest Soul Beasts should hate the Holy Ghost Church more than they hate us. How can those Soul Beasts work together with them?" Elder Song heaved a sigh and said, "It doesn't matter whether my guess is frightening or not. The only thing we can do is resign ourselves to fate." The Golden Tree's golden light dome was becoming increasingly weaker, and Shrek's Soul Masters had recovered to about 50% of their physical energy and their soul power. They had another shot in this battle, but could they really see the light at the end of the tunnel? Right at this moment, the Soul Beast army finally discovered the masses of unwelcome guests that were coming from the northwest. Shrek Academy's powerful individuals who were hovering and watching in midair heaved a sigh of relief when they saw the Soul Beast's reaction. A pack of Soul Beasts separated from the back of the great army outside the western and northern city walls and charged towards those unwelcome guests. Apparently, those unwelcome guests seemed ferocious and unfriendly to them as well. Elder Song suddenly raised her voice and hollered in the sky, "Our reinforcements are here. Hold on, everyone. Victory is in sight." Her voice was very loud, and sound waves resonated throughout every corner of Shrek City. She soared through the sky as she spoke, transformed into a green shadow godly hawk once more, and flew towards the Bear Lord. Elderly people had the most experience and the most wisdom, temporarily disregarding the fact that Elder Song was the strongest individual in Shrek City's camp for now. Her calm response, during a crucial moment to utilize these unwelcome guests so that she could galvanize Shrek's warriors, created very important effects. At this point, Shrek City's warriors were all fatigued and exhausted. The Golden Tree could only help them recover part of their physical strength and soul power, but it couldn't take away their fatigue and their exhausted minds. What else was better to boost morale other than reinforcements? Reinforcements meant hope, the hope to survive. The Golden Tree's protection quietly dissipated, and the battle erupted once more after that temporary pause. Shrek's Soul Masters had managed to recover part of their strength via the Golden Tree's powers, and they seemed like they had been injected with steroids as their morale flourished. The coordination and teamwork that they seemed to have lost due to their fatigue and exhaustion seemed to return, and the soldiers managed to suppress the Soul Beasts to the point where they couldn't charge onto the top of the city wall. This was the fighting strength that morale brought. Word of reinforcements had reignited the flames in everyone's hearts. The pack of Soul Beasts who had separated from the army clashed with the strange mass of unwelcome guests in the distance. Both parties started to fight, but they were quite a distance away, and nothing much could be clearly seen. However, everyone could see beams of light glowing here and there, and the Soul Beasts were clearly unleashing various soul skills to fight those unwelcome guests. The flickering lights that came from those unwelcome guests in the distance were quickly extinguished, but they seemed like the beast tide when they attacked the city. There were just so many of them. It didn't take long before the pack of Soul Beasts were overrun, and the massive unwelcome guests began to pick up the pace as they charged towards Shrek City. Shenlina helped her mother fight back Soul Beasts while she monitored those unwelcome guests in the distance. Reinforcements. Are they really reinforcements? How can those spectral creatures be reinforcements for Shrek City? But they are clearly fighting the army of Soul Beasts. How else can these forces be explained other than that they are reinforcements? Furious howls could be heard continuously from within the Soul Beast army. Orders came down from the higher-ranked Soul Beasts, and the army didn't separate any more forces to fight those unwelcome guests. They continued to attack Shrek City arrogantly with everything they had. The enormous army of spectral creatures were coming closer and closer, and they quickly arrived near the edge of the Soul Beast army. Fortunately, the night was dark, and Shrek City's soldiers couldn't see anything at all as they fought on the city wall. They could only see dots of light. Under such circumstances, nobody could tell who was here to reinforce them and where they came from. However, everyone had a lot of faith and trust in Elder Song's words, and they also believed her because they were craving reinforcements to arrive too much in their hearts. The spectral army began to launch an offensive. Their point of entry was very coincidental. They charged in from a position between the western and northern fronts at the start of the battle. The Soul Beasts on these two fronts were led respectively by the Myriad Demon King and the Scarlet King, and they would definitely fight back if they were attacked. However, they were currently besieging the city with their full strength, and they didn't have much coordination between them. This external force actually forced their way deep into those Soul Beasts' ranks. The Soul Beasts at the back of the army were relatively weaker, most of them being 10-year and 100-year Soul Beasts. The spectral army charged through the army of Soul Beasts like a hot knife through butter. At this moment, there were 9 large pitch black gates located about 20 kilometers northwest of Shrek City that nobody could see, and these gates were spitting out spectral creatures continuously. There were skeletons, liches, and frightening headless horsemen among these spectral creatures. Occasionally, there would be enormous creatures like abominations that possessed frightening fighting strength, but there were no creatures stronger than those entities. There was a tremendous scarlet gold vertical light positioned in the sky in the center center of and behind those 9 gates, the eye flickering with eerie and chilly light. This verticalized pupil was entirely white like snow, and deathly grey colors filled the space around it. There were streaks of scarlet gold colors with sun patterns around those grey hues. This vertical eye emanated intense spiritual undulations. Muffled incantations could be heard as those scarlet gold lights transformed into patterns that connected those 9 gates together so that they could be opened continuously. Eye of the Asura, a martial soul true body. Yes, who are you? I was here. He had returned when Shrek City needed reinforcements most. He had arrived before evening, but he didn't rush towards Shrek City as soon as he reached it. He could clearly see what was happening to Shrek City high up in the sky from a distance. Who are you? I wasn't hasty and impulsive when he witnessed that terrifying beast tide, and he didn't head down to assist Shrek City despite his roiling emotions. He was very clear that even though he had become a soul sage, and he was far stronger than typical soul sages, he was still by himself after all. Could he deal with that tremendous army of soul beasts by himself? He couldn't, and he would have a very slim chance of charging inside Shrek City and meeting up with his companions, and doing so wouldn't help the situation. Killing several soul beasts from the outside wouldn't solve Shrek City's problems at all. So he had to think of other ways to resolve Shrek City's dire situation. Therefore, he began to prepare after studying the situation carefully. Preparing for necromancy. Who are you? I was very clear that using necromancy and summoning spectral creatures to the Douluo continent were the abilities of an evil soul master in everyone's eyes. However, he couldn't be bothered with his reputation at a time like this, and helping Shrek out of their siege was more important than anything else in the world. He began his necromantic spells. He relied on his formidable spiritual power and unleashed one of the strongest necromantic spells that the Calamity Necromancer Electrolux had left on his spiritual imprints. Spectral Calamity. He couldn't unleash the full strength of Spectral Calamity because he wasn't strong enough, so he could only summon those relatively weaker spectral creatures. Under such circumstances, they were the limit he could reach with his current strength. Those large black gates opened one after another and connected to the demiplane Electrolux had left behind for him. Who are you? Al began to control and command those spectral creatures when they appeared, one after another. He didn't mobilize his spectral army as soon as they appeared. The spectral army needed time to accumulate, and when the day was still bright, he was afraid that his spectral army would cause chaos and panic in Shrek City when they appeared on the battlefield. Therefore, he waited until nightfall and the sky was completely dark, so nobody could clearly see the flatlands from a distance. Only then did Who Are You command the spectral army that the spectral calamity had summoned towards Shrek City. Who Are You had transformed into the Eye of the Asura, and he had released as much spiritual power as he could. He relied on the demiplane that Electrolux had left behind for him to summon a great many spectral creatures within a short period of time. Who Are You understood that his spectral army would be no match for this beast tide because he couldn't summon any copious spectral creatures. However, what he had to do now was buy time for Shrek, and he had to delay and hurt the soul beast army as much as possible. Only then could he create an opportunity for Shrek to survive. This method was a lot more meaningful and practical than just throwing himself onto the battlefield. Just as Who Are You had predicted, his spectral army appeared at the most opportune time because of his meticulous calculations. This army of reinforcements came very suddenly but at the right time. Who Are You managed to galvanize and reinvigorate Shrek City's morale. Furthermore, as luck would have it, he had mobilized his spectral army right when the golden tree was healing Shrek City's warriors. Shrek City's dire situation was instantly greatly ameliorated. Over on the eastern front, the city wall had been broken through, but Earth-type soul masters swiftly repaired it. The battle was still at its peak. Who Are You chose to charge in from the northwest because he had discovered that Bai Ji was too adept with healing on the southern front. Even though he didn't know she was the Emerald Swan, who was ranked number 4 amongst the 10 great savage beasts, he was unwilling to face an adversary like that. His spectral creatures weren't afraid of death, and his most important task was to deal as much damage to the soul beast army as possible. Who Are You spectral army would achieve a far smaller effect if he attacked on Bai Ji's front. Who Are You strange spectral army burst onto the battlefield. Most of them were skeletal soldiers and Jiangshi, who were low tier undead. However, even though they were considered low tier, they were still strong. 2 or 3 such undead stacked together had fighting strength comparable to a 10-year soul beast. Other undead, like those headless horsemen and abominations, were considered especially ferocious in battle. Furthermore, these undead were far less afraid of death than even soul beasts, and they didn't know what pain and fear were. All they cared about was attacking manically. Under such circumstances, the situation was gradually developing towards one that was beneficial for Shrek City. Who Are You spectral army was rapidly spent, but the undead creatures spawned continuously from behind. At this moment, the entire spectral army had charged onto the battlefield, and seemed endless as they charged madly towards the northwestern front. The Scarlet King and the Myriad Demon King had realized where the problem was at this point, but they still had to deal with the elders from the Sea God's Pavilion. Every single elder from the Sea God's Pavilion was a veteran of battle. Their age had given them much experience and made them resilient, even though they could see what their reinforcements consisted of from the sky. At a time like this, it didn't matter why these unwelcome guests were here because the enemy of their enemy was their friend. The army of soul beasts was the greatest threat to Shrek City. Therefore, they tried their best to preoccupy and restrain those powerful soul beasts so that they couldn't direct the soul beast army, and so that they wouldn't participate in the battle against the undead creatures. The Eye of the Asura quivered and finally descended from the sky, landing on the ground as it reverted to Who Are You's original figure. The black gates closed up one after another. Who Are You's spiritual power was almost completely spent. He had no choice but to stop the spectral calamity. Who Are You still felt a little afraid as he stared at the immense army of undead. He knew that his body couldn't keep up with his current spiritual power. If he used this necromantic spell as a tidal Douluo, he would probably be more frightening than any evil soul master, as he would possess an army of undead that was truly endless. If he could have powerful undead like liches and bone dragons, he could directly convert living beings into undead after death, and he would possess the strength to fight against powerful opponents. This thought disappeared as soon as it appeared in Who Are You's mind. The pursuit of strength and greatness made him momentarily excited, but he broke out in a cold sweat in the next moment, because he remembered something that Electrolux had told him before. Electrolux had told him that he couldn't rely on this powerful ability to control undead. Otherwise, disaster and bloodshed would befall the continent if Who Are You lost control of his undead army. That was very much something that he did not want to see. Who Are You crossed his legs and sat down. He turned his sight inwards and withdrew his soul rings into his body. After his last rose gold and red soul ring entered his body, he became entirely transparent. Before he disappeared into the air, just like that. Concrete material spiritual power allowed his million-year soul ring from the sky dream ice worm to evolve once more. Imitation had become part of his innate abilities, and even though his spiritual power was almost entirely spent, imitation would still naturally protect him. Who Are You could not be thinking about how much damage his undead army could do to the army of soul beasts. His top priority at the moment was to recover his spiritual power as quickly as possible so that he could continue working hard to defend Shrek City. Bai Ji could see what was happening on the northwestern front, but she couldn't leave her own side behind because they needed her protection. Intel passed from soul beast to soul beast and eventually to her, and she quickly found out the details about what was happening. The Emerald Swan's elegant face became ghastly pale. Where did this army of undead come from? Are they controlled by humans? If so, how frightening is that? She felt her heart ache as she watched soul beasts die one after another. Their losses had far exceeded their previous estimations. The beast god DT knew that Shrek would be hard to deal with. Therefore, he had personally engaged in battle as soon as possible so that he could take out Shrek's most ferocious fighting strength as quickly as possible. Soul beasts weren't entirely shut off from the world. At the very least, they knew about Elder Mew's death. However, Shrek's hidden strength still exceeded their judgment. Elder Mew's spirit was still around, and he had teamed up with Elder Sun to seal DT in a way. This had rendered the army of soul beasts leaderless, and they could only fight independently in terms of commandeering their fellow soul beasts. That wasn't all. Those stationary soul cannon shells fired from Shrek City brought unimaginable pain and damage to the army of soul beasts. Many soul beasts, even top-tier soul beasts, didn't know what was going on before they were turned into dust. Several thousand stationary soul cannon shells. These shells had caused more damage and injuries to the soul beasts than the frontline combat. More than 1 million soul beasts resided in the Great Stardow Forest, but most of them were between 10 to 100 years old, while some couldn't even be considered soul beasts. This time, even though the Great Stardow Forest soul beasts had swarmed out, they had only mobilized about 400,000 soul beasts. Among them had been more than 300,000 soul beasts who had between 10 to 100 years of cultivation. But now, How many soul beasts were left? There were less than 200,000 soul beasts remaining, which meant more than 40% of the soul beast army had perished on the battlefield. They were only assaulting a single human city. Shrek City wasn't considered a large-scale city, like the various empires' capital cities, but it had already caused so much damage to the Great Stardo Forest soul beasts. More than 100,000 of the soul beasts who had perished died from those stationary soul cannon shells. At this moment, the flatlands all around Shrek City were strewn with the carcasses of soul beasts. Some soul rings had been extinguished due to time, but new soul rings drifted out from other soul beasts who had just died. So what if they emerged victorious in this battle? Could they still charge into the human world like they had imagined at the start so that they could weaken humans as much as possible? It was no longer possible. Bai Ji was clear that even if they won this battle, the soul beasts wouldn't gain much from this victory. After all, there wasn't much in the human world that soul beasts desired. The soul beasts were only fighting for their survival. But what were they going to do after this battle? Were they to continue fighting? Unless they didn't want the Great Stardo Forest to survive, continuing to fight would only lead to their own death and destruction. Tien was powerful, but he couldn't fight against the entire world by himself. Shrek Academy had their ways to restrict him, but did the other empires in the Douluo continent not have similar methods? Therefore, even if the soul beasts could annihilate Shrek City, the Great Stardo Forest soul beasts could only retreat back into the forest. This beast tide had become meaningless after their losses amounted to more than 40% of their total forces. They didn't weaken the humans. Instead, the humans dealt a heavy blow to the strength accumulated over 10,000 years by the Great Stardo Forest. What do I do? What should I do? Bai Ji was lost. She could only command her kinsmen as she unleashed healing soul skills one after another so that she could save as many of her compatriots' lives as possible. The undead army was still fighting. Their battle against the soul beasts was like the soul beasts' battle against Shrek City's warriors. The army of undead suffered massive losses, and 10 undead had to die to kill one soul beast. But so what? Huo had relied on his formidable spiritual power and the demiplane that the Calamity Necromancer Electrolux had left behind for him, and summoned 100,000 low-tier undead creatures. If these undead clashed with the army of soul beasts in a frontal battlefield, those undead would be rapidly overrun. However, the soul beast army had been fighting for 2 days and 2 nights, while the top-tier soul beasts were currently preoccupied in battles with Shrek Academy's elites on the other side. Under such circumstances, what could the other soul beasts do? 100,000 undead charging through their ranks, and the disturbance they caused was enough to affect the tide of battle. Furthermore, even though those undead didn't know how to cooperate, injuries didn't really affect their fighting strength. Their point of entry was excellent, and the army of soul beasts on the western and northern fronts descended into chaos. Their assault on Shrek City was now conspicuously weaker than before. Reinforcements were here. Shrek's warriors on the city walls didn't know that an army of undead was their reinforcements, but the soul beasts' flowing charge reinvigorated their spirits. The soul beasts who had climbed to the top of these two sides were forced back down, and some soul masters who were no longer preoccupied took this temporary break to recover their soul power. A furious and deafening roar echoed high up in the sky. Golden yellow clouds rolled in the sky, and an enormous figure could be faintly seen struggling in the clouds. Tien couldn't participate in the battle below, but his formidable strength meant he still had a connection to the army of soul beasts, and he could still feel their situation. He had discovered that things were going wrong, and he redoubled his efforts to break through the catty seal that Elder Sun and Elder Mu were using together to hold him down. The army of undead began to dwindle in number, and new ones no longer charged in from the distance. There were fewer and fewer undead, but the army of soul beasts that they were attacking was also dwindling. Time continued to pass as the soul beasts attacking on the northern and western fronts had their fighting strength greatly weakened. Boom, boom, boom. Black lighting detonated throughout the glowing clouds high up in the sky. Cracks began to appear in the sky. Tien was finally about to break out from his seal. Elder Mu and Elder Sun had restrained Tien for 3 days with the Golden Tree support. However, the Golden Tree had consumed a lot of energy when it had healed the city's soldiers, and when it forcibly repelled the soul beasts which were flooding in. Furthermore, Tien could feel the dire situation that his kinsmen were in, and he couldn't be bothered with his own injuries as he tried to break out of the seal at any cost. The seal was about to crumble. The soul beasts were galvanized a little when they heard Tien's roar. The Emerald Swan communicated with the other 3 savage beasts across the battlefield, and finally gave the order to temporarily retreat. The swarming beast tide gradually retreated, but they circled around Shrek City to the northwest as they retreated. They would have to resolve the problems behind them if they wanted to exert any pressure in front of them, even though they didn't know where the army of undead had come from. These things were far too irritating. Their assault on Shrek City could stop for now, but they had to exterminate these unwelcome guests. No matter what happened afterwards proved the gap between the undead army and the soul beast army. When the army of soul beasts from all 4 fronts surrounded them, it didn't take more than 15 minutes for them to overrun the army of undead, until there wasn't a single unliving creature left. Even now, not many people could see who their reinforcements were from the top of Shrek City's walls. The soul beasts had retreated, but they didn't move too far away. They began to eat the carcasses of the soul beasts that had died to replenish themselves. The 4 savage beasts finally rendezvoused with one another. They didn't speak at all, and their faces looked as black as could be. They had lost this battle, and the immense losses they had sustained were heavy blows to the Great Stardo Forest's vitality. This was especially true since the auspicious Emperor Beast, the 3-eyed golden lion, had passed away. They were all waiting for Tien to break out of his seal. Only the beast god could make the final decision about whether they should attack or retreat. The top of Shrek City walls were wretched and in tatters. In the same moment that the army of soul beasts retreated, everyone slumped to the ground on the city walls. This included soldiers, soul masters, and even Shrek Academy students and teachers from the inner courtyard. They had been locked in bitter combat for a day and a night, and they had consumed far too much energy in both mind and body. At this moment, there was hardly anyone who could still stand on Shrek City walls. The boost of morale brought about by the arrival of reinforcements vanished with the soul beasts' retreat, and only surging exhaustion and fatigue were left behind. The 4 savage beasts didn't know this, but if they had continued with another assault at this moment, they would probably have achieved impressive results. Everyone from the Tang Sect was also slumped limply on the ground. This group included Nan Shuishui, Nan Qiu, and Yu Yi. Everyone's clothes were stained with the blood of soul beasts. Reality proved that the battle strategies that Bei had arranged were very sensible. They relied on their mutual chemistry and how close they were to each other to maintain themselves as one body even in the toughest of times. Nan Shuishui was a soul Douluo, and in addition to Yu Yi and Nan Qiu, the 3 of them became effective reinforcements. Even though everyone was injured, everyone managed to survive. Ji Duigan became the most brilliant celebrity on the southern city wall after this battle. He had killed countless soul beasts with his judgment sword, and there were many warriors and soul masters from Shrek City Defense Army who were hollering, "Sword God!" At this moment, their sword god couldn't keep himself together anymore, and he panted heavily as he leaned against the battlement. However, not a single tinge of exhaustion could be seen in his eyes. There was only excitement. Yes, he had managed to achieve a better understanding of swordplay through this battle, and had achieved some breakthroughs with his own strength. Ever since he got together with Jing Ziyan, many new things had been added to his life. This time, he had relied on this continuous battle and danger to infuse these new elements into his sword intent. For him, doing so was more important than raising his soul power. Bei was also panting in similar fashion, but there was a look of anxiety on his face as he stared into the sky. Shrek's perils hadn't been completely resolved. Look, what's that? Shu Sanchi suddenly raised his hand forcibly and pointed into the sky. Everyone followed the direction his finger was pointing, and could see a shadow soaring through the air in the distance. This shadow came straight for Shrek City, and descended to the city wall. A trail of green flames flickering with strange images followed behind this shadow. The green flames were the mark of Shrek. It also meant that this person, who was flying back from a distance, was friendly. Reinforcements. Everyone's eyes sparkled when they thought about Elder Song's exclamation from before. Shrek City walls were swimming with victims who were wounded and exhausted, but the soul beasts had suffered far heavier losses than Shrek did. Quite a few soul masters had perished in battle, but there were a lot more who had survived. The Tang Sect's members quivered when they felt a wave of peculiar spiritual undulations, and the shadow that was flying through the air landed beside them. The night was dark, but this shadow carried Shrek's green signal, so his soaring figure was glaringly clear. This person quickly descended from the sky and landed on top of the city wall. Furthermore, he landed amid the Tang Sect's members. Everyone from the Tang Sect was mired in extreme exhaustion at this moment, but they couldn't help but exclaim in pleasant surprise when they saw him. Yes, Wasn't that Huo Yuao who was descending from the sky? Huo Yuao had recovered his spiritual power and sensed the changes in Shrek City at the same time. He had managed to escape from under the evil eye tyrant king's nose, so it wasn't hard to imagine how strong his spiritual power was. When he discovered that the army of soul beasts had temporarily retreated, he flew to Shrek City without hesitation. Of course, he took a long detour to avoid the soul beasts that were concentrated on the northwestern front, and arrived on the southern side of the city. He used spiritual detection and quickly found his buddies. Eldest senior brother, second senior brother, third senior brother. I'm back. Tears welled up in Huo Yuao's eyes when he saw his buddies strewn all over the ground. However, he didn't sob out loud. Instead, he swiftly released his spiritual power to check on everyone's wounds. He heaved a sigh of relief when he was sure that everyone was more or less fine, and sat down beside Bei Bei. Bei Bei stared at Huo Yuao and forced a laugh as he said, "You're back after all, Yuao. You've really caused quite a disaster this time." Huo Yuao forced a laugh too and said, "I know, and I'm sorry, eldest senior brother." Shu Sanchi said, "That's enough, Bei Bei. How can you blame Yuao for this disaster?" He didn't know that Huo was the three-eyed golden lion. "Are you saying that our Yuao was supposed to die instead?" Bei Bei turned towards Huo Yuao and sighed faintly. "You shouldn't have come back." Huo Yuao gazed back at Bei Bei and said, "I had to come back, eldest senior brother." Bei Bei glared at him. "The beast tide is still here. Haven't you considered that you'll create a spark for Shrek and the Tang Sect?" Huo Yuao looked up at the gash in the sky that was becoming larger and larger. "Is that Helison sealing away Ditian? This beast tide should be ending soon." Excitement flowed in Bei Bei's eyes. He shook his head and said, "No, Helison isn't the only one. Our ancestor is also there." "Ancestor?" Huo Yuao was momentarily stunned before he recovered. His eyes sparkled as he asked, You're saying our teacher is there, too?" Huo Yuao's emotions rippled, and everyone from the Tang Sect around him instantly felt a wave of flourishing spiritual pressure radiate from his body, shaking everyone's hearts. Bei Bei exclaimed in astonishment, "Yuao, your spiritual power. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.